It's the middle of the night. I wasn't sleeping real well, so I grabbed my phone off of the nightstand and just to see if anything was going on out there in the world. I can't begin to express the sorrow I felt when I saw the news. 2 shot, 1 dead, several arrested in Harney County. The FBI had killed good men, arrested good men, and my heart is truly aching today because I see that we are on a path that is going to lead us to places that no American wants to go, but every true American will go. Because we have no choice. I'd like to tell you a story. I will start by reading a small section of the Declaration of Independence that I think is particularly applicable tonight. And it says, "But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and provide new guards for their future security." The British regulars were in Boston in 1770. They were there to enforce high taxes, taxes that were levied on the people without representation, taxes that were wrong, that were unfair, and taxes that were enslaving the people. Now, at that time, Sam Adams was a vocal leader, a strong leader, and he was very willing to stand up and tell the people, resist this tyranny. And so he put together some demonstrations, did some writing and some different things, as many are doing in America today. On March 5th, 1770, there was a group of patriots demonstrating against the British tyranny. They were unarmed. They had nothing to throw but snowballs and sticks. That's when the British regulars opened fire, killing 6 American patriots. I'd like to tell you about one of these men. His name was Crispus Attucks. Crispus was a fugitive slave. He'd escaped his master and was working as a merchant seaman. And Crispus was a true patriot. So when the demonstration began, being a true patriot, Crispus was going to stand for the right thing. He was going to do the right thing. And he did. Crispus was the first to fall in the Boston Massacre, and so began the American Revolution. When a long train of abuses, let's shift to today. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution specifically prohibits the federal government from owning or controlling any land inside the states, except for those parcels that sit beneath forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and necessary buildings. That's it. Forts, arsenals, magazines, dockyards, and necessary buildings. Yet, they own 50, 60, 70, 80% of the western states. And they keep the Americans, the people who actually own that land, from using that land to better themselves, to increase their prosperity, to be truly free. And anyway, this all started with the Hammond family. They're just true Americans ranching. They're a ranching family. And their ranch consisted of 2 large pieces of acreage. Now, the federal government wanted all of that acreage in that area, and so they were buying it up. They were driving other ranchers out of business and buying their parcels as they became available. Now, before long, half of the Hammond acreage or ranch, that parcel that represented half of their property, was surrounded by property that the federal government had purchased. And once they had that property all hemmed in, they wanted it from the Hammonds, and so they did everything they could to harm the Hammonds. There was a road that has been used for some 100 years or so to move cattle back and forth to that acreage so that they could graze and eat the grass. Well, the federal government said, you can't use that road anymore. So sure, you can keep your land, but we're not going to let you go to it. You can't get on, you can't get off. Well, the Hammonds, and rightfully so, didn't put up with that, and they just continued to move their cattle up and down that road, moving them to and from pasture. The Hammonds had water rights on that property. They had applied and got them from the state of Oregon. The federal government said that the Oregon water rights didn't apply, and so they wanted to take the water and divert it into their new wildlife refuge, therefore making it impossible for the grass to grow on the Hammond property and for the cattle to drink. Well, the Hammonds took them to court. The Hammonds won, and they kept their water rights. They thought it was over. No, not yet. The federal government still wanted that land. They still wanted to drive the Hammonds from property that they owned, property that they had bought and paid for. So they began to build a fence around the water, making sure that no cow could drink. This just went on. And so this was the environment. This was the tone of things when the Hammonds started a fire on their property to burn brush. And this is a normal procedure. Another time they started a backfire to stop a wildfire from racing across their land and perhaps destroying their home. Now, on one occasion, the fire got away from them and burnt 100 acres of sagebrush that was being illegally controlled by the federal government. On another occasion, it burnt only a couple of acres. Now, for you city folk, 100 acres might seem like a lot. It's not. 100 acres will feed only 2, maybe 4 cattle for a year. It's just not significant. And the thing is, any graze that was destroyed in that only affected the Hammonds negatively because they were leasing that ground. So there was no harm, no foul, and the federal government did not send any assets or any personnel to put out these fires. The Hammonds did it themselves. So really there was no harm, no foul. And this was just business as usual, maintaining the land in the West. Now I know that because I own acreage and we use fire. And sometimes it gets away from us a little bit. Now, here's the crazy thing. If the federal government has no right to own or control this land, then certainly they have no right to sue people over it. They had no right to sue the Hammonds. No right at all. They were constitutionally prohibited, but they did it anyway. Now, here's the crazy thing. There are checks and balances that the founders built into our government. They knew that the federal government must remain small. And these checks and balances are in the form of the leaders in our states and our counties. Governor Kate Brown, Sheriff David Ward, Judge Steve Grassley, the county commissioner. These people have all sworn an oath to the Constitution. They can't have their job until they swear that oath because they are constitutionally obligated to do so. And James Madison said it best. He said that when the federal government steps over the line and begins to take rights that belong to the states, that the state is obligated to interpose itself between the people of the state and the federal government to make sure that the federal government does not harm the people. So let's take a look at how all of this could have been avoided. You see, when the federal government started buying up land around the Hammond Ranch, a constitutional sheriff would have stepped in and said, I am obligated to uphold the Constitution here in this county. You may not purchase our county. Get out of my county. A constitutional governor would have said, get out of my state. But they didn't do anything. They sat back. When the federal government tried to take away their water, tried to blockade their own land, a constitutional sheriff would have stepped in and said, if you do anything to stop the Hammonds from moving their cattle on and off of this property, if you do anything to take the water away from the Hammonds that they legally own, I will arrest you. I will put you in jail for violations of the Constitution. But he didn't. When the federal government sued the Hammonds, a constitutional sheriff would have said, don't touch them. If you touch those people, you are in violation of the Constitution, and I will jail you. But he didn't. When they came after the Hammonds a second time, a constitutional sheriff would have said, you cannot touch these people because that would violate the Constitution. But he didn't. When the when the Hammonds were forced to turn themselves over to the prison, a constitutional sheriff would have been there, and he would have said, my friends, I will escort you home because you have been charged and tried and found guilty, all in violation of the Constitution of the United States. You will not serve a day's time here, and if anyone comes to get you, you call me because I'll stop them. But he didn't. You see, everything that happened. Oh, actually, there's one other that I should point out as well. The federal government has policing powers, but they're very limited. They have the power to police felonies on the sea, pirating. They have the power to police counterfeiters. They have the power to police for treason. That's it. Now, the Hammonds weren't charged with any of these things. So when they came to charge them with that, there's one more thing that the sheriff could have done, but he didn't. Now, if Governor Kate Brown, if Sheriff David Ward, if Judge Steve Grassley had done their duty, then the Hammonds would have not had all these problems. And if the Hammonds had not had all these problems, well, then there would have been no reason for patriots to go to Oregon to resist this government abuse. And so, and if the patriots had not had a reason to go to Oregon, if there had been no reason to go at all, then no one who would have been arrested today, no one would have died today. But they did. And they did this because Governor Kate Brown is a constitutional criminal. People died today and were arrested today because Sheriff David Ward is a constitutional criminal. People died and were arrested today because Judge Steve Grassley is a constitutional criminal. And the county commissioner, same thing. I just don't know his criminal name. So, my friends, I look at things a little bit like this. Sam Adams and Ammon Bundy. There are more similarities than differences. Crispus Attucks, the first to fall in the American Revolution, and Lavoy Finicum, the first to fall in Burns, Oregon. More similarities than differences. You see, my friends, you cannot celebrate America in 1776 and condemn Oregon in 2016 unless you are ignorant, unless you are uninformed, or unless you are an enemy to this country. I hope that that the American people will pray. I hope that you'll pray for the family of Lavoy because they're suffering terribly today. I hope that you will pray for Ammon and the rest who have been jailed. I hope that you will pray for them. I hope that you will pray for the people of America, that we will become informed enough that we will stand, that we will raise our voice together instead of just a few of us. Because, see, a few of us are easy to push over. We're easy to arrest, and we are easy to kill. I hope that you will pray for your own strength. I hope that you will find courage. You see, everything depends on it. Good night.